Chapter 1: Genetic Inheritance and Genetic Control. In this chapter, we are going to cover the following subtopic. Number 1. Mendelian Genetics. In this subtopic, we are going to cover on monohybrid inheritance, dihybrid inheritance, and extension of Mendelian genetics. Number 2. DNA structure and DNA replication. Number 3. Protein synthesis, which includes two processes, which is transcription and translation. In transcription, we are going to look at the process that occurs in prokaryotes and also eukaryotes. Next is translation, which involve the following step, which is initiation, elongation, and also termination. Next is gene regulation and expression. In this subtopic, we are going to look at what is operon, what is the function of operon, and what are the components of operon. Next is mutation. We are going to look at what is mutation and example of mutation. The last one is on population genetics. In this subtopic, we are going to look at gene population and Hardy-Weinberg principles. The learning objective of this chapter is number 1, explain the terms in genetics. Number 2, describe Mendel's principles, which involve the law of segregation and law of independent assortment. Number 3, explain examples of extended Mendelian genetics. Number 4, describe human pedigree analysis. Number 5, describe in brief the structure of DNA double helix. Number 6, cite evidence from Meselson and Stout experiment regarding DNA replication. Number 7, describe DNA replication, which involve the synthesis of the leading strand and also lagging strand. Number 8, explain the nature of the genetic code. Number 9, explain the process of protein synthesis. Number 10, explain the concept of operon and gene regulation. Number 11, describe the mechanism of lag operon in the presence and absence of lactose. Number 12, define mutation. Number 13, describe the types of mutation. Number 14, define gene population. Number 15, describe the Hardy-Weinberg principles. And the last one, explain the factors that change the frequency in a population. But first, before going deep into the details of the subtopic of this chapter, we are going to go through some important terms in genetics. The first term is genetics. Genetics is the scientific study of heredity. It includes genetic similarities and genetic variations between parents and offspring or among individuals of a population. Heredity is the transmission of genetic information from parents to offspring. Basically, parents will pass on their particular traits to their offspring through genetic codes or genes. So these genes are found in the organism's DNA. The offspring produced shows inherited similarities and also variations. So some traits are similar between offspring, and there are also traits that are different between the offspring and also between offspring and also the parents. Examples of traits that can be inherited from parents are the hair color, the eye color, the skin color, height, and many more. These are some of the examples of traits that can be inherited by the offspring. Genes. Genes is a segment of DNA that serves as a unit of heredity information. It includes a transcribable DNA sequence that yields a protein or RNA product with a specific function. A gene determines or it will affect an organism traits. For example, here we have a cell, okay, a human cell. So within this human cell, it has many chromosomes. Okay, so for a human cell, it has 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs of homologous chromosome. Okay, so this chromosome, for example, it has genes, okay, that codes for the expression of certain traits. For example, eye color. Okay, eye color. So in order for this eye color to be expressed, the DNA segment in this area, we call it as gene, consists of DNA sequence. Okay, so the DNA sequence. The information within this DNA sequence will be used to produce mRNA. So basically, DNA sequence, okay, which is the information for the gene that code for eye color, okay, is used to synthesize mRNA. Okay, mRNA. So basically, the gene sequence can produce RNA products such as, for example, mRNA, messenger RNA, tRNA, and also rRNA. Okay, so in order for the eye color to be expressed, the DNA sequence, okay, which is the gene, okay, will be used to produce mRNA during transcription, and then from the mRNA is used to synthesize proteins. Okay, for example, enzymes or hormones. So the production of this protein will be used to express certain traits, such as, for example, eye color. Locus or gene locus. It is a specific place along the length of a chromosome where a specific gene is located. A specific gene means it codes for the expression of certain trait. For example, here you have a pair of homologous chromosome. Okay, so you have here the genes. Okay, the location for the gene that code for example, hair color. Okay, and then you have another pair of homologous chromosome. Okay, and here is the location or the locus for the gene that codes for skin color. Okay, so basically locus is the location where a specific gene is located. Alleles are alternative forms of a genes. A genes may have two or more different alleles, and each alleles will have different base sequence or different DNA sequence. And by having different DNA sequence, it produces different proteins that will affect the expression of different phenotypes. Basically, alleles are genes governing variations of the same character that occupies the corresponding position or loci on a homologous chromosome. So these alleles may produce different phenotypic effects. For example, blood type. Okay. So blood type is controlled by a gene that has okay, that has 3 different alleles. So the alleles involved are IA, IB, I or IO. Okay, so for an individual, the individual can only inherit 2 of these alleles from the parents. Okay, so for example, if the parents, okay, if one of the parents, the male parents, for example, is blood type A, so the male parent genotype can be IA, okay, that marries to a female which has blood type O. So the allele for the female parents, okay, is IO. Okay, so this produces offspring, or the children will have blood type IA, IO. Okay, so the phenotype of the offspring will be blood type A. Okay, so Alleles are different forms of a gene that produces different phenotypes. In this diagram, it shows a pair of homologous chromosomes of a flower for a pea plant. This pea plant is heterozygous for the gene that code for flower color. As you can see in this diagram, the homologous chromosome has a pair of alleles that consists of the dominant allele for purple flower and the recessive allele for white flower. So in this diagram, you can see the position of the gene for that controls for the flower color. So the position is called as locus. The position of the gene is called as locus. Each dominant and recessive allele will have different DNA sequence, as you can see. So the allele for purple flower will have DNA sequence that is different from the DNA sequence for the recessive allele. So the purple flower allele will lead to the expression of an enzyme that involved in the synthesis of purple pigment. Okay, while the recessive white allele will result in the absence of the enzyme. Because this individual plant is heterozygous for the gene that code for flower color, heterozygous, it means that it has a dominant and recessive allele. So therefore, the pea plant will express purple flower phenotype. Character. Character is an attribute or characteristics of an organism. Trait. Trait is one of two or more variants in a genetic character. Wild type is the phenotype most commonly observed in a natural population. In this diagram, it shows you 3 of 7 characters studied by Mendel in pea plants. For example, here you have flower color. So this is the first character. So for the character flower color, it has 2 different traits. The dominant trait, purple flower, and the recessive trait, white flower. For the second character is flower position, and the trait for flower position, it can has dominant trait axial for flower position and recessive trait terminal for flower position. And the third character shows here is seed color. The dominant trait for seed color is yellow, and the recessive trait for the seed color is green. As for human, for example, the character that can be studied, for example, is eye color. Okay, and the trait, okay, eye color, and the trait can be the person can have blue color, or green eye color, or brown eye color, for example. Okay, so those are different traits for a character. Another character that we can study for human, for example, is hair color. Okay, so the character is hair color, and the trait can be, for example, the person can have black hair color, or blonde hair color, or brunette hair color, for example. So those are examples of different traits for a character. Genotype. Genotype is the genetic makeup of or combinations of allele in an individual. Phenotype is the observable physical and physiological traits of an organism. Phenotypes are determined by its genetic makeup. Dominant allele produces the phenotypic characteristics in the presence of homozygous or heterozygous condition. Recessive allele, the phenotypic characteristics of a recessive allele is not expressed in heterozygous condition. The phenotypic characteristics is only expressed in the homozygous condition. For example, here we have flower color for pea plant. So the allele involves are the dominant P allele, that expresses purple flower, and the other allele is the recessive allele, small p, recessive P allele that expresses white flower. Okay, so the genotype for the plant, okay, you can have three types of genotype, which is capital P, capital P, capital P, small p, small p, small p. So the phenotype expressed for each of the genotype will be purple flower. This one also produces purple flower, and this one produces white flower. So the organism, okay, or the individual for this genotype is homozygous dominant. This one is heterozygous, and this one is homozygous recessive. The recessive allele is only expressed in the homozygous recessive condition. In the heterozygous condition, the recessive allele will not be expressed. Homozygous. Homozygous is the condition for an individual that has two identical alleles for a given gene. Homozygous exists in two forms, for example, homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive. Homozygous dominant has a pair of dominant allele, for example, capital B that expresses black hair color. Homozygous recessive has a pair of recessive allele, for example, small b that expresses blonde hair color. Heterozygous. Heterozygous is the condition of an individual having two different alleles for a given gene. For example, capital B and a small b. So this expresses black hair color. For heterozygous, the observable trait is determined by the dominant allele, which masks or not express or covers the effects of the recessive allele on a particular trait. For example, here, heterozygous, the recessive allele is not expressed and will not produce blonde hair color. By looking at this picture, now let's discuss how is it possible that this mixed race family manages to have two sets of twins with different skin color.